Welcome to Bridge the Gap with hosts Josh and Lucas, a podcast dedicated to informing, educating, and influencing the future of housing and services for seniors. Powered by Solinity.
Welcome to Bridge the Gap podcast. We have an exciting episode today. We're very, very excited to have back a guest, Cara Silletto.
Hello.
Welcome to the show again.
Thanks for having me back.
Yes, and so we are in a very unique backdrop today, Josh. We have traveled with our team to the Thrive Center in Louisville, Kentucky. And this is a place, we got a brief tour and we're gonna spend some more time here today, but I'm blown away by what's here in this building. And this is in Cara's hometown.
It is.
And so this is gonna be a very, very interesting show where we kind of melt together some aspects of the setting that we're at and some technology, but specifically today, Josh, we're gonna dive in with Cara on a topic of onboarding. So Cara is a retention expert, a best-selling author. She speaks at conferences, she trains people, and so we're really glad to have her back. And for those that are listening or watching on YouTube, if you stay to the end, we're going to talk a little bit more about a giveaway, exciting giveaway that Cara's been so gracious on. So Cara, let's dive into this onboarding topic and maybe just give us some framework there and what you're seeing in the marketplace and how this really plays out tangibly when people are trying to bring in new employees.
Sure. So we know we've got a lot of turnover happening today. That's pretty obvious. And one of the things that we get ourselves into is we got to get them on the floor. We got to get them on the floor. We're already short-staffed. Just hurry up, get through the HR paperwork. We got to get them on the floor. And that can actually work against you because if we don't take time to talk about who we are as an organization, the intentional culture that we want to have here, what those expectations are. You know, on the last podcast, we talked a lot about communicating your expectations. And a lot of that can happen in the onboarding and orientation phase. So if we don't onboard properly and we don't have the culture and kind of the history and who we are, they're never really going to fall in love with us as their employer. They're never really going to feel like a part of the family. And then we throw them onto the floor, maybe with somebody as a liaison to ask questions to, but we don't do any team building anymore. Are you kidding me?
Yeah, so you touched on, as an operator, what can become a vicious cycle, and it's like two negatives don't make a positive always, and it's that need. Sometimes you're in a pinch, you're in a crunch, and you just got to get somebody on the floor. You're like, oh, we'll teach them on the job, or we'll put them with somebody that's got some experience, learn on the fly. And what happens is you just lose so much in that communication and laying out the expectations. So I'm looking forward to hearing some tips on how to kind of break that trend.
Yeah, so it's a balance between being speedy and yet getting through to them what you really need to. So in some of my talks, I say we need to expedite the process and get them really the way that I, excuse me, the way that I talk about that is you never want somebody to sit the bench. And so on one hand, you want to be speedy that they get out there and they get to do what they love. So you don't want them to have to wait, hold tight. It'll be a while before you can actually do the job that you thought you were going to be doing or the job that you really want to be doing. We don't want to hold them back from that. I think of it as it's like telling Superman, no, just be Clark Kent for a while. Just wait, hold tight, no cape, no, not yet. So we don't want to do that because you may run them off that they say, I'm not even doing what I thought I was going to be doing, and I'm Superman and I have so much to offer and they won't let me. But then at the same time, we don't want to push them out there too quickly where we didn't give them the real proper introduction to their team or to the job. We didn't give them proper training, that type of thing. So it's just a balance of figuring out what do you really want them to know when they come on board. And instead of thinking about it as a boot camp mentality, okay, well then we'll just cram all this stuff into 3 days or 5 days or however much. Think of it this way. What do your new hires need day one, week one, month one, and year one? And you can continue to sprinkle training and team building and building their confidence in the company, deepening their roots in the organization and on their team, which is going to make them stay longer, and just really making them feel at home and comfortable. So
back up just a minute, because I'm a little bit slow on the uptake sometime. You shared a lot of information. So it sounds like for the employer, the operator, the manager, you're saying take a step back and almost what I heard is kind of create an outline. What do you need to accomplish? Maybe there's things that you're trying to squeeze into that first week or that first month that, hey, that's not mission critical,
right?
But those may be a little bit further down the road. So prioritize your training, maybe put that on paper or put it into whatever electronic training program. Is that what I'm hearing?
Absolutely. Use your LMS, use your learning management system. And also remember that from an adult learning standpoint, we retain very little when it is pushed at us all at one time. So that's another reason that you don't want to cram all the learning, because then what happens if you cram it all into the first 1, 2, or 3 days, then 3 weeks in or 3 months in, they make a mistake and you're like, we taught you that on day 1. Really? Because you taught me like 800 things that all came at me that were new. Another thing to think about is, has this person ever worked in senior care or not?
Sure.
Because I encourage senior care providers to have a separate onboarding checklist for people who've never worked in our field. We have a lot of jargon.
Yes,
Come
we
on
do.
now. We have a lot of acronyms. We have a lot of jargon, not only within the profession, but within your building, within your company has its own jargon and acronyms. And what do you name the different wings of your building? And what do you call the different positions within the building and things like that? So that's something that if people haven't ever been in the field or ever worked for your company in particular, there are a few added things that you should do. You don't want your new hires to ever feel stupid.
Yeah. So speaking of acronyms, and you spelled it out for us, but you said LMS, Learning Management System.
Yes.
So, okay, as an operator, emerging technologies, everything, we're getting pushed all these systems and softwares and fancy bells and whistles that are supposed to help promote your learning management system, to help deliver your learning management system. I'm sure some of that's good. Your perspective, you get to see a lot of different operators, a lot of different operations, a lot of different learning management systems. Pros, cons, what is out there, what's effective, what's working with today's workforce that delivers that?
That's a great question. Honestly, I'm not as well versed on the healthcare specific learning management systems. As you know, half of my business is in senior care and half of my business is outside senior care. So a lot of the systems that I know are kind of industry agnostic. But I do know for kind of Mac Daddy programs, Cornerstone is one of the huge learning management systems and success factors and things. I believe Healthcare Source has a learning management platform as well that I've heard good things about. And so I can't tell you exactly which ones would be best for you because it kind of depends on the size of your business. I mean, Cornerstone's only going to be for somebody who has tons of buildings because it's the Cadillac model of that. But I would just make sure that you find an LMS that fits the size of your company. And certainly if you're growing, you need to take that into consideration. But the learning management systems have great uses, but you've got to have somebody who owns the system. You have to have a system administrator that is their job, at least part-time, at least 20 hours a week, someone at your corporate office that assigns those classes properly out to people, that sets up the email notifications, that will follow up with people when they're behind on classes. Because we all know there's some classes that you have to have for compliance purposes, and that's the main reason groups go into the LMS space. But then there's also a lot of soft skills training that should be pushed out. That's one of the things we talk a lot about is with management. So if we want to kind of stay with onboarding here, but we talk about managers who get promoted or even supervisors, what is your management training plan? What is their orientation like when they go into management? Too many people have access to an online class platform, for example, and they say, oh yeah, well, we have a healthcare academy, or we have one of these things, Relias or whatnot. We have these, but there's no plan to use it. There's no, our administrators need to take this many classes a month, or they need to make sure they have these classes if they're a newer administrator, for example, or a newer department director. So we definitely help companies figure out what is that training plan for the onboarding and all new hires, and also anybody that's promoted or brought in at the supervisor or management level. It's critical.
I think you brought up just such a critical piece, and that's who's going to champion this. And I think it can become overwhelming. A lot of our audience, we've got a wide variety. We've got folks that are part of huge organizations that have someone dedicated full-time at the corporate office, or a regional person that is championing the training system. The struggle is, what kind of advice and what level of priority can we give to our listeners that may be part of that single community or a very small platform that's in rural America that is really wanting to provide a quality work environment, a quality onboarding experience, but they're feeling like they're drowning, and they're like, I can't afford somebody that's going to pay 20, I can pay them 20 hours a week to just focus on this.
Right.
Sometimes you say, well, maybe you can't afford not to. But is there anything you're seeing out there, or what advice can we give our listeners?
Sure. And certainly somebody who has an independent facility, they're not going to need that 20 hours. They might need 5 hours a week that somebody works on that. And really, if you have under 100 employees, you probably still need a learning management system just for the compliance reporting, but you may not need to have a full-blown system. And, Excel spreadsheets might actually still work for you to some extent. But I do think that the learning management systems, they can just automate so much of that for you and really take it off that person's plate. The big takeaway here is not so much in which system to use, but have a system. Whether you're using Excel spreadsheets or whether you get a basic LMS or a Cadillac model LMS, you have to have an intentional plan of what are we pushing out when, that is beyond check, that we have to have hand washing and bloodborne pathogens and, things like that. It's got to go beyond that, particularly into the soft skills. What communication modules are they getting? Team building modules, any type of management training and effectiveness, understanding today's workforce, or appreciating your staff more, that kind of stuff.
So let's, we've talked a little bit about the onboarding, the importance of that, the learning management system, a champion to really drive that. Let's talk about what I see in the industry a lot is, sometimes we do even a great job or a good job or a satisfactory job at the onboarding. You get that person in there, and then annual, training rolls around, and you've got this pile of regulatory stuff that you told them and you taught them real quickly on the onboarding process, but you got to check off that list for the state when they come in.
Sure.
But, what I often see is that, you've got a 3-ring binder, sometimes full of materials, or an all day where you're just hitting them with so many things just to get a checkoff list. What are some best practices that maybe we can make sure that we're being effective, not only at the onboarding, but kind of carrying that torch through the organization, through their tenure, to help with that retention?
Right. So that goes back to the day one, week one, month one, year one type of thing. You can take that into the annual regulatory stuff. And I focus, I'll just be honest too, I'm not a compliance guru. I'm more on the soft skills and the effectiveness of managers. So to me, you just want to make it suck as less as possible. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So don't have bad e-learning. Stop, please. Do not have terrible e-learning. Don't have e-learning that is the same every single year, that has not been updated for years. Do not use providers. Do not go that route, because it's doing you a disservice with your staff. Then they will dread training and dread when they're assigned something, because I have watched this same exact video 3 times already. So you've got to make sure that your stuff is up to date, and look at the providers. When you go to these trade shows, Ask them that question. How often are you updating the content, and do you have anything new? What do you push out on the soft skills side as well as the compliance type training? That's a really big one, because you can just give your entire staff a bad taste in their mouth about training altogether, and then it's when they feel like they've got to go through these modules again. Shouldn't be that way.
Right.
They should be excited that they may not be excited about every single compliance type class, but if they like the e-learning, if it's been done well, then they'll say, oh, great, I get a break for a little bit. I'm going to do a couple modules here. And I would encourage you to put in some of the soft skills or more fun modules with the compliance stuff, so it isn't the dreaded check day, right?
So you're kind of breaking my heart a little bit. You're saying the 1980s OSHA VHS tape that we've been showing for 25, 30 years, that's not effective? No?
Please stop. Your people hate that. Don't you hate that? I mean, every person that does it hates it. So why would you torture your staff when we don't have to do that? There are better providers out there. Go to your next trade show, find a better provider. They are out there. So that's a really important piece. And also check in with people. I think if we're going to talk about onboarding today, we can't move on without saying you've got to check in with your new staff. And the quicker people are leaving, right? So if you've got a lot of 30, 60, 90-day turnover, check in at day 3. At day 8. Don't wait 30 days if you have people that aren't showing up for week 2. And whatever it is, if you have people showing up not for day 2 after a first day of orientation, which I hope is not boring and the terrible e-learning like click, 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 quiz.
Yeah.
That's bad e-learning. Okay. So if that's what their day 1 is boring HR paperwork and lunch by themselves and terrible e-learning in the afternoon, why would they come back for day 2? Or if day 1 is we pushed you, or week 1 is we pushed you out on the floor and gave you no resources and training and everyone's too busy to answer any questions you have, why would they come back for week 2?
Yeah.
So we've got to check in with our people, and you have to determine at what point makes sense. Is it at the end of day 1? How did that go? What questions do you have? Here's your buddy. I was just at a conference this weekend that they brought back the old school buddy system, that the new people, if it was your first time to this conference, you got assigned a buddy. People volunteered to be buddies who wanted to walk around with a newbie. It was phenomenal. I mean, I had buddies that I talked to that said, I was scared to death to come, and my buddy was with me along the way, answered all my stupid questions, like, what does LMS mean? Or whatever it is, right?
Yeah.
That kind of thing. And so bring that back. It is a great team building tool. Make sure you have some kind of liaison or buddy for those newbies that come in, the new hires. And then check in with them regularly. Another big trend that I'm seeing is stay interviews. So certainly you cannot wait until year 1 is over or even 6 months in to check in with people, and instead ask them questions about how we are as an employer. How's it going? What do you like about working here? What do you wish was different that would make coming back tomorrow even better for you?
So I love that. How do you create that to where they feel like they can give you an honest opinion, like that environment? Because
that's a good question.
It's like you can ask that question, but how do you create and foster an environment to where if you're going to say that they can come in and sit down with you and feel like they can give you that constructive feedback in a positive manner and not feel like they're going to get whammed or
You're
fired.
right.
Well,
You're
and
right.
it's also different generationally. Maybe you can go into that. You can't just give a cookie cutter like program, because different generations are going to answer that question differently, won't they?
Exactly. And I'm so glad you brought that up, because you can't just jump into stay interviews with, here is our template questions, things like that. You can't do that, because you're right. People don't trust you, and they're thinking, why are you asking me that?
Yeah.
Well, what's going to happen? Why did he ask me that? That kind of thing. And so they're not going to be super candid. Some people will, their life is an open book. But most people are not going to be candid if you just go up and say, hey, tell me about a frustrating day recently. Wait, why? What?
There are no frustrating days here. This is a wonderful place to work.
It's a great place, So yeah, I actually, when we teach about stay interviews and how to implement that, we say just start with an informal 5 to 10 minute check-in, standing up, just walking to them where they are and saying, hey, you know that we're trying to make this a better place to work. That's the goal. You got to remind them, we are trying to create a better place to work. So I just wanted to get your thoughts on some things. How do you feel about this as an employer? They're probably still going to be pretty tight-lipped and everything. But those questions of, tell me about a great day recently. Why was it so great? And then you follow, you get them talking, and then you follow that up with, would you tell me about a frustrating day? Mm-hmm. What really got under your skin? And it could be that systems were slow, that residents were abusive, whatever, It could be that the team didn't help me. It could be that my boss yelled at me and I didn't even know that I did anything wrong. Just be prepared for anything to come out of their mouth. Or it could be, I had a really rough morning with my kids or my family at home, and I just had trouble focusing that day because my mom is sick, or, anything like that. And so you ask them then, so tell me about a frustrating day that really stressed you out. And is there anything that we could do so that doesn't happen again? Because if it's systems that, oh gosh, well, this LMS keeps churning, or my, whatever system, or this kiosk that we have isn't working right, and it's slowing me down. You can find out things like that drive your staff crazy, or it could be management problems, could be teamwork problems, those kinds of things.
Well, and so talk to the manager that may be used to going down this path and getting the very vague answer, that now is talking to a millennial that really gives it back. I mean, full raw feedback, unadulterated feedback.
Yes, more than their 2 cents.
Right. So maybe they're used to that kind of like, oh, we're good, everything's fine, thanks for asking. But then they talk to somebody that's just really gives unadulterated feedback.
Right. So with that person, oftentimes that person thinks they know what should be done around here, and I've been that person in the past, in my past career. So I would encourage you, listen, let them just blah, 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 right? Let them go, let them give you all the ideas, and really listen, because there's going to be some golden nuggets in there. There's going to be a few things that's like, that really is a good idea. The other 9 things you said, but that one was really good. So you don't want all of it to go in one ear and out the other. But make sure that if you can, and I know we don't have all the time in the world, but don't cut them off. You might want to tell them, if you could change 2 things around here, what would it be? You know what I mean? Instead of just, how could we make this a better place? Because that opens up the floodgates, right? So you could say, if you could prioritize all these great ideas you've got, what would you do if you had the power to change 2 things around here? And really just let them dive into that, or make them think and prioritize, and let the good ones bubble up to the top.
So to Josh's point earlier, let's talk specifically, just maybe to kind of round out this topic. Let's talk to the operators that's smaller, regional. They just don't have that full-time, person. So they've got to maybe go out to a third-party trainer that to come in and help maybe kickstart either annually or biannually. What should they be looking for to kind of help them bridge that gap in onboarding and then continued training, follow-up, so to speak? We have somebody we just brought on our leadership team, and one of the things that he said was, repeat and follow up until they mock you. Just kind of like continue that. You don't just say it one time or 2 times and expect everything's going to happen, especially with something that's new. So maybe you can speak to that.
Right. Yeah. So we see all too often that training, particularly for managers and supervisors, it got cut long ago. And we have been promoting people into these positions the last 10 or more years without giving them the tools to be successful. And then we wonder why we've got all this turnover. Why don't people want to work here? Well, it's because your managers oftentimes don't know how to manage conflict. They don't understand the millennial mindset. And so there's a terrible us versus them type of mentality going on. There's lots and lots of gaps between where we'd like our managers to be and where they are. And don't get me wrong, every building has a few incredible managers. It comes naturally, or they've had the training from their past, or great mentors, for example. But I would encourage any building, no matter what your size is, no matter how big your group is, to identify the gap of what is keeping our managers from being the best they can be, and then ask a training group for that, right? So there are some programs, we were talking earlier, we are rolling out a new retention boot camp for leaders that includes self-awareness things. So I'm a huge fan of self-assessments, of personality assessments and things. So we're actually combining now our generational training with self-assessment and personalities, right? Because you can have an introvert and an extrovert who's a boomer, or an introvert and an extrovert who are millennials. That's not a generational thing. So I think coupling those together, as well as EQ, which is emotional intelligence. That's another big class that we're seeing a need for now. Those types of things, if we can figure out what are the gaps between what our managers need to have to be successful at managing not just millennials, but all of our staff, and how do you manage a boomer and a millennial and not tick everybody off, right, and push people away. So identify those gaps and then find a training company. Some of it can be done online. There is some good online soft skills stuff, but really you need either in-house or bringing in experts to do regular quarterly trainings. I see that a lot, or monthly trainings, depending on the size of your group.
Yeah. So, Cara of Crescendo Strategies, you were so nice last time. You are the author of Staying Power, and this is an incredible book that we did a great giveaway last podcast. And one of our close followers, David Hopkins, was the winner of the book. And
That's
he posted
right.
about it. So,
Thank you, David.
yeah. He's an ED in Florida, does a great job down there. Really has a heart for senior living, and so we're going to do that again. Cara is very gracious to do that. So we would just ask our listeners to go onto our social pages and like and share and comment and tag somebody in the comments that you think needs to know about this topic of retention and staying power and the things that we're talking about today that are in the content of Cara's book. So great interview here at the Thrive Center in Kentucky. And so, Cara, thank you so much for being with us today. We'll connect with you in the comments section. And thank you for listening to another great episode of Bridge the Gap.